Raider Nation, what's good? Welcome into another episode of the Silver and Black Sports Network podcast. On today's show, we're taking a deep dive into the matchup with the Colts. We're bringing in Sports Illustrated's Zach Hicks to break it all down. He offered up some great insight into how in the world the Colts have turned Daniel Jones into a top 3 passer in the NFL. Nobody expected that. It's been pretty insane. And also, he dove into what's working for them in the running game as well, and what they're most susceptible to on defense. He really dove into where a guy like Jacoby Myers or even Trey Tucker can actually thrive in this game. Plus, the bad news we got yesterday, Kolton Miller is headed to IR. He's got a high ankle sprain and a hairline fracture. That's according to Ian Rappaport, who was first to report that one. We'll explain how the Raiders replace him on the left side and what it means for him going forward. All that and more coming your way on today's show. All right, guys, we'll start by hitting on the situation with Kolton Miller. But before we do that, a programming note. I mentioned it on the last podcast, but I wanted to give you guys a heads up here at the top of the show in case any of you missed it, that we are switching up the cadence of our podcast. Obviously, you'll figure that out today. Going forward, we'll be dropping them on Wednesday and Friday mornings, which will actually help us get better guests. It gives them more time to analyze things, and the content will also be better going forward as well. I think this cadence just works better for all involved. Also, if you aren't already subscribed to our free Raiders newsletter, go check it out at silverandblacksportsnetwork.com. You won't be disappointed. Those drop on Monday and Friday mornings and are chock full of all the latest and greatest Raiders news, analysis, and storylines as well. Also, too, might want to just address a little elephant in the room. If you guys happen to catch this and see this right here, yes, it's a black guy. I do jiu-jitsu. I caught a knee the other day. And so, yeah, that's just going to happen every now and then. Doesn't always work out that way, but this one turned into a nice little shiner. Hopefully I don't have too many of them on the pod. I know it doesn't look too great, but bear with me, guys. I'm working my way through this one. In the meantime, let's dive into Kolton Miller. Obviously, that's a brutal loss for the Raiders with him heading to IR. That means he'll miss a minimum of 4 games for the Silver and Black. But since he's got a hairline fracture along with that high ankle sprain, who knows, it could be longer, much longer. We'll hear from Pete on that today over at the facility. In the meantime, expect Stone Forsythe, the Raiders' top swing tackle, to slide into the starting lineup, which is brutal given the fact that the Raiders' O-line looked like they were turning a corner against the Bears. Things were looking good in that game. I got Ashton going as well. So now it's another new group trying to get some continuity going after losing their best player in Kolton Miller along that offensive line. Now JPJ needs to step up even more. He played a heck of a game, but you got to believe he's their best guy out there now. So now Charles Grant, he's another guy to keep an eye on. Pete said that he will compete. He mentioned that a lot, but he is very much a developmental guy. He's been active a lot, so I don't really think that he'll be a factor in things for at least a couple of weeks, or if Stone is really bad, they might throw him in there, but he is still developing big time. They also signed Leroy Watson to the practice squad. PFF gave him an overall grade of 35.1 last year. So, yeah, that speaks for itself. In the meantime, Stone is the guy. I know you guys aren't stoked about that, and I don't blame you, really. It hasn't been great for him. The last 2 seasons, he's played 909 snaps at both left and right tackle. And according to PFF, he gave up a total of 7 sacks, 22 quarterback hits, 49 hurries, and 67 pressures over that time. Obviously, not the greatest numbers, so buckle up, but let's be positive here and hope that maybe he turns over a new leaf with the Raiders. And keep in mind that it is really hard to find swing tackles. So the fact that they got him, a guy that can play both sides, that's a win for them. Obviously, you just hope to not have to call on him. And now they actually do have to call on him. So we'll see how that goes for him. In the meantime, let's turn the page to the Colts and bring in our guy, Zach Hicks, who covers them for Sports Illustrated out there in Indy. He also co-hosts the Locked On Colts podcast, and he really brought the heat, I think. He actually touched on how the Colts could take advantage of the void left by Kolton at left tackle and many other things. Overall, I thought he did a great job of breaking down this matchup and what Indy brings to the table. And he really wasn't a homer at all. He was honest about everything. He kept it real and broke down the matchup really well and explained where the Raiders can win as well. So here, check it out. It was a good one. All right, Zach, so it's finally here. Raiders and Colts in week 5 of the NFL season. Before we really start to dive into this matchup and everything, we were kind of talking about it before we got going here. The Colts coming kind of out of nowhere. How do you wrap your head around just this start for them so far this season?
Yeah, it's funny. Like, we always thought here in Indy that they had the talent on the roster. It was just really came down to quarterback play. If the Colts could ever get just average quarterback play under Shane Steichen, they could do something. I mean, they were on the verge of making the playoffs with Gardner Minshew, a couple years ago, which actually led to you guys giving him a contract, right? I believe right
Yeah.
afterwards to come in
Yeah,
there.
that didn't work out too
No,
well for the Raiders, though.
it typically doesn't
Man.
with Gardner Minshew, but it almost did with
Yeah.
the Colts. They nearly made the playoffs with him. And then even with Richardson and Flacco both being pretty awful quarterbacks last season, not to mince my words there, they were still like a game and a half out of making the playoffs. So we always knew that there was talent on this roster. It just came
Mhm.
down to, did they have the quarterback that could maximize this talent? And while a lot of us still wanted Richardson to be the guy this year because of the tools, the traits, the upside, the rushing ability, the Colts decided to go with Daniel Jones for that ability to distribute the ball. And he's turning out a career best season so far. And as we are seeing him have the best run of his career, the Colts offense has hit new highs. They're a top 5 offense
Yeah.
in football through the first month. And the defense with Lou Anarumo, a big change from Gus Bradley the last couple years, which you guys know Gus Bradley as well. You guys have a lot of
Yeah.
parallels with the
A
Colts
lot of
here.
ties, yeah.
Yeah. But you guys know how that Gus Bradley defense is. It's a little bit archaic. It's a little bit more throwback and static. Lou Anarumo's more of a new age defensive coach, and he's gotten this Colts defense, even with some of the bumps and bruises in this first month. You know, they're a top 15 defense right now, a pretty solid group. So I think just that change on defense, that change in philosophy, plus Daniel Jones just clicking with these playmakers on offense has led to this Colts emergence. Did I see it coming? Absolutely not. I did not.
Yeah.
I mean, look, if you told me before the season Daniel Jones was going to put up a first month the way that he did, I would have told you were just on hopium right there. You know, you're just believing too much because he's on your team. But he looks like a new man playing with Shane Steichen, and they're doing some great things here at Indy.
Yeah, and let's start there with Daniel Jones. Indiana Jones, as everyone's calling him. What the heck has worked so well for him in this Shane Steichen offense?
Yeah, a lot of it is the Colts just mashing the easy button for him. And that's not to take away what he's doing this year, because he still has to take that information and process it and perform with that information. But, you know, when we look at offensive play calling, the easy buttons are pre-snap motion, play action usage, and just taking the load off of your quarterback, not just spamming deep shots from static offensive looks and no motion pre-snap. So what they're really doing at a high level right now is utilizing motion. They're one of the highest motion rate teams in football, to give Daniel Jones those pre-snap indicators of man versus zone coverage. And then they're leaning into the play action game out of heavy personnel groupings early in games when teams are scared of Jonathan Taylor. You know, Jonathan Taylor's back there, one of the best overall players in football. So they're coming out the gate in 12 personnel, 13 personnel, doing max protection play action shots to these skilled playmakers on the outside. And all Jones has to do is just focus on that one read and get him the ball. So we are getting a lot of those easy things for Jones in the offense, but he's been accurate. He's been making sure he's getting the right read on man versus zone, and he's been able to dissect defenses to start the year. So I think the one thing we've really seen, like, again, outside of this past game against the Rams, is as long as he can get that read pre-snap and identify where the mismatch is, this Colts offense is going to be lethal. The one way you can really get to them is if you can rush with 4 effectively and win and play aggressive zone coverage on the back end. That's kind of what the Rams did, especially being a road environment. It was harder for the Colts to do their pre-snap motion. But in every other environment they've had this year, whether it was the Broncos trying to play press man the entire game, the Colts have man beaters on their offense, and Jones was able to find those guys. Whether it was the Dolphins playing a heavy blitz scheme with zone coverage on the back end, Jones was able to beat that by getting to his hot routes quickly. Or the Titans just playing 4-man rush and zone defense, the Colts just had answers for that. So really, I think the way to beat this Colts offense right now with how Jones has played is to win with 4 and then have an attacking group of guys behind and just get the Colts behind the sticks. But if you don't get them behind the sticks, if you can't get them into 2nd and 12, 2nd and 15, 3rd and 8, 3rd and 9, if they're able to stay ahead of it at all times, they're going to be a deadly offense all season.
Yeah, and I think Raider Nation probably is listening to you talk about that and saying is like, okay, good, but also bad because they play a very soft zone defense. But, you know, the front 4 has been really effective for them. And we've seen even in this last game, Max Crosby and them really take things over. How do you think the Raiders match up specifically just with their front against this Colts offense?
Yeah, a big part of this will be the health of the Colts offensive line. They were down their starting right guard this past game, who has been fantastic to start the year. Matt Gonsalves, a 6'6", 330-pound right guard. He's only allowed 2 pressures in the Colts' first 3 games. He missed this last showing, and they had to go to last year's undrafted free agent Dalton Tucker on the interior. And he just didn't have the same juice, the same ability as Gonsalves, and it led to more breakdowns across the offensive line. But this Colts O-line in general is pretty solid overall, and I think them being in a home environment this upcoming week will be very beneficial because the Rams started timing up that snap count in the second half of this past game, and it led to way more issues than what it typically would have. So I think the Colts getting back home, getting the snap count right, getting to a more controlled environment, and hopefully getting Gonsalves back will make this O-line a lot tougher to deal with. But then again, at the end of the day, Max Crosby's a top 3, 4, 5 passer, whatever you want to call him, pass rusher in football. Yeah. It's hard to combat what he brings. So I think the Colts are going to be chipping him a lot. They're going to be getting as many bodies on him as possible. And even then, he's still going to knock down some balls and be a very effective player. But yeah, I think the Raiders pose a pretty good test for them just because you have that 1A pass rusher that everyone's looking for. Mm-hmm. Crosby's just a difference maker, and it doesn't matter how many bodies you put on him, he's going to be an impact player.
Yeah, no, he definitely is. And the Raiders have also been really solid against the run. So I think this is a matchup that, you know, they come into it and think, okay, like we can have success against the run. Obviously, the game against the Commanders was an outlier for them. That was horrible. In the first half in particular, I think it was 174 rushing yards, if I remember right, just in the first half alone. And the tackling was, you know, off the charts bad. But outside of that, they've tackled really well. Just with the Colts and Jonathan Taylor, obviously he leads the league in rushing right now, so they've had a ton of success. So it's no easy task for the Raiders here in this game. What has worked so well for them rushing-wise with Jonathan Taylor? Like, what kind of schemes are they kind of take advantage of defenses with?
Yeah, so the most fascinating thing about the Shane Steichen philosophy on offense is, you know, he calls it we pass to score, run to win, right? Essentially what that really is, though, is we pass to soften up the defense to set up the run in the second half while we have a lead. You know, so if the Colts go into halftime with a lead, you're going to get a lot of Jonathan Taylor in the second half. So your goal really against the Colts is start fast and shut down the pass early, because then it makes them lean on the pass too heavily in the second half. And before you know it, Jonathan Taylor might finish the game with 10 touches, which sounds crazy because he's a star running back, but the Colts don't run the ball that heavily to start out games. They want to come out in heavy personnel with you scared of the thought of Jonathan Taylor, and then we're going to throw out of that. We're going to throw, you know, at a 70, 75% clip to start the game in like the first, maybe second quarters. But then when you get into the third and fourth quarters, if it's a close game, you're going to get a heavy dose of Jonathan Taylor. And that's where Jonathan Taylor's been doing his damage this year. I think he's averaging nearly 90 yards per second half this season. Yeah. And it would have been more if that 50-something yard touchdown counted this past week. He had a 50-something yard touchdown taken off the board, and it would have been just another second half that we've seen from him if that would have counted. But that's really where this Colts offense gets you. They play off that threat of Jonathan Taylor. So you want to load the box up. They're coming out in 12 personnel, 2 tight ends out there. They look like they're going to run the ball heavy early, and then they throw the ball off of play action to Tyler Warren, to Michael Pittman Jr., and they steadily move the ball early. So then the second half, you combat that by having nickel on the field to combat those 2 tight end looks, and then they run at you with that. So a lot of their offensive philosophy is we're going to pass the ball a lot early and effectively to set up the whole Jonathan Taylor just feast in the second half.
Yeah, and I think it is interesting for the most part. Like we've seen, you know, a lot of teams do that where they come out, you know, are very play action heavy before they've even established a run this year. I think it's kind of interesting. It's an interesting strategy. It's obviously worked for the Colts in this one, and then you'd be able to wear them down late. That's something I think that's frustrated a lot of Raiders fans, because Chip Kelly has come out and busted out the play action passing game a lot, but hasn't necessarily gotten Jeanty going, especially early on in games, but really at all until the last game. And so now all of a sudden he breaks through. I think conversely, the Raiders are probably going to be opposite of the Colts in this one, just given what we've seen out of Geno Smith, doing a lot of running the ball early on, trying to establish that, you know, and then try and take those deep shots over the top. But again, Geno hasn't had too much success in that outside of the game against the Pats. You know, so it's kind of weird. It's hard to get a read, you know, on what this Raiders offense wants to do. Last one here, just with the Colts offense as a whole, I guess, like, what has been the most effective thing for them that you feel the best about against this Raiders defense, given the way that Patrick Graham calls things?
Ooh, that's a good one. I just think overall, just the variety of weapons the Colts have
Mm,
it just poses such a threat to a lot of defenses, especially if they get Alec Pierce back this week, who missed this past game
yeah,
with a concussion. Because when Pierce is back, you have one of the best deep threats in football, and Alec Pierce, who takes a top off of defense and can win those 50-50 balls, especially great when Daniel Jones doesn't have that great a deep ball. Pierce
yeah,
can go up and get it and fight for it and win those contested catch situations. And then if you're not giving them the deep ball, they have their tank throwback wide receiver that can win over the middle of the field, and Michael Pittman Jr., 220-pound wide receiver who runs like a running back when the ball's in his hands. If you try to play more man coverage, Josh Downs is an insanely difficult cover in the slot. And it doesn't matter how good your slot corner is there. And then Tyler Warren was the missing piece to all of this. Tyler Warren is playing like Brock Bowers did in a lot of ways last year to start last season, where just that dynamic force at tight end that the Colts have been able to line up at fullback. They've been putting him at sniffer tight end, inline tight end, slot wide receiver, and using him as a mismatch nightmare for defenses. So I think the toughest aspect of this Colts team is just that there's no one guy to key on. And the Colts kind of saw this past week with the Rams when we played the Rams, where they had their top corner on Devontae Adams all game, and they tried to bracket Puka Nacua, but it's hard to bracket a guy when he's that good of a player. And then they had other weapons too. Tutu Atwell broke free for a long touchdown. So when you have this plethora of weapons, it stresses the defense so much. And I think the Colts, obviously, they don't have a Puka or a Devontae Adams, but they have so many specialists that are great at their individual role, to where if you're going to play tight man coverage, we'll throw a jump ball to Alec Pierce. If you want to play man coverage with safeties over the top, we'll throw an ISO route to Josh Downs. If you want to try to play some zone coverage, Michael Pittman Jr. and Tyler Warren will win over the middle of the field and create after the catch. So they're just a tough offense to really combat, because there's nobody that you can really key on and focus on. You have to be really, really sound in what you're doing across the board and hope that you can just dominate the trenches. That's going to be the biggest key for this Raiders defense.
yeah. No, and I think that's their key this year and kind of what they were banking on. They again relying on Max and his supporting cast to really get home, and obviously he's the key. To that. And it is hard when you have an offense that has kind of an answer to everything, and you can trust those guys to win those one-on-one battles. Like, as cliche as that is, it's really that simple to winning. Let's take a look at the defense for the Colts. Obviously, that's been an interesting group, and the Raiders have had their struggles on offense, and we haven't seen a complete game, from the offense. What's your take as a whole of how Lou's called things and where they've had the success there, the biggest successes on defense?
Yeah, I think this is the best time to be facing the Colts defense is early this season, because they're still figuring things out on that side of the ball. A lot of these guys they brought in here are either new faces or guys that haven't really played like in this type of system before, like guys who have been here the last couple of years where they've been under Gus Bradley, a very, very different defense. So you are seeing some growing pains with this defense, but I think overall it's such a well-coached unit in terms of like just the scheme is good, and it's so easy to it's so exciting to say that coming from Gus Bradley the last couple of years. Again, you guys
Raiders fans know,
right?
Yeah.
I love Gus Bradley, great human being, and I think he did some good things. But getting to this more like modern NFL scheme and having a defensive coach that isn't just about playing the same thing over and over again. It's about tricking opposing quarterbacks, making them hold the ball a little bit longer to give more time for your pass rush. I think that's where the Colts defense has really thrived this year. Every quarterback they've faced, even the guys who get the ball out quick, like Tua and Matt Stafford, have held the ball longer against the Colts defense than they had in weeks prior and teams prior. So they are getting quarterbacks to hold the ball just a little bit longer, which is giving their pass rush time to get to the quarterback. They're mixing coverages, very diverse in how they cover things, and they've taken the ball away pretty well this year. We look at their 3 wins this season. They had 6 takeaways in there, I think, 6 takeaways through those 3 games. On third downs alone, they have 4 interceptions, and they're holding quarterbacks to like a 25 passer rating on third downs this year. So
Yeah, that's crazy.
yeah, they've been a very good pass defense in a lot of ways. Where they're susceptible, though, is the run defense. They're very leaky in run defense. They're essentially a team that is, we'll let you get your yards on the ground, but when you have to throw the ball is when it's going to be difficult for you. Matt Stafford kind of shredded them this past week, but Stafford's just playing at a different level than most quarterbacks. But I think when it comes to like any other quarterback besides Stafford right now, I think this is a difficult defense to throw on, even with some of their weaknesses and weak points they have. It's just a really diverse scheme that throws a lot of things at quarterbacks and makes you think for a second. So As long as they are able to keep doing that, I think by November, December, this defense is going to be in a really good place. But right now, they do have some growing pains because guys not being on the same page, some guys still getting acclimated to the season. This is probably the time to face them because I think they'll be better later in the season.
Yeah, well, it's one of those things where like Raiders fans are probably sitting back thinking like, okay, you go and look at the Bears and the Chargers, two teams who had a ton of success against Geno Smith. They kind of keep it simple for the most part. A lot of zone, sitting back, keeping everything in front of him. That's where he struggled the most. So maybe making him sit back there and think a little bit more. I don't know. Maybe it'll help him out. I'm
Maybe.
not really sure.
Yeah, and Geno's played some good football the last couple of years, and I know he wants to get vertical. That's where he thrived with the Seahawks. The Colts have done a pretty good job of taking away the vertical ball outside of their corner falling down on that game-winning touchdown last week where they had 10 guys on the field somehow. But
crazy. How do you do that?
Yeah, I know. I want to get into the headset on what happened on that play. But But yeah, like they've done a pretty good job taking the vertical ball away. They have Cameron Bynum on the back end who has 2 interceptions already this season at free safety. So they're an opportunistic defense. If you want to push the ball down the field a little bit, they will force some tough passes. But Geno Smith's got a very live arm who likes to attack down the field. So you can never count Geno Smith out, even with the 2 games he's just had recently.
Yeah, and it is kind of crazy because that second half against the Patriots in the opener, like that's what Geno and this offense wants to be, and they push the ball down the field at a crazy rate. And he's a guy that has had so much success throughout his career pushing it deep. And I think in the game against the Bears, like he didn't complete a single pass over 10 yards, if I remember right.
Oh, man.
Which is just crazy for a guy who's like lived off of that. And obviously, Raiders fans and everybody around the league is losing their minds after what they've seen out of Geno, and rightfully so. Like he leads the league in turnovers. It's crazy. In that regard, but I think they like to hear the fact that you say that they're susceptible to the run. Where have they struggled the most against the run? Like, why has it been such an issue for them?
Yeah, when it comes to run defense, it's always about all 11 guys on run defense. You can never have one guy out of place or one guy with a bad fit or one guy freelancing because that can lead to massive holes and massive cutback lanes. And I think with this Colts defense, again, I think they'll be much better in November, December. There's always just like one guy off in his fit. It's and a lot of it is that linebacker two that's been just rotating bodies this season and doesn't really have the consistency. But it's a very hot and cold run defense right now where they'll have half a quarter or maybe even a full quarter where it's just run stuff, and they look great in run defense. But then other quarters where they're allowing like 8 yards a carry, and it's like, oh my gosh, we can't get on them. I think the biggest way to combat this Colts defense in the run game is you want to come out in some heavier personnel groups because the Colts are not really going to match that with base. They'll get to some grizzly fronts where they have 5 guys on the line and 2 linebackers, and so they will have some heavier like grizzly fronts out there. But I think you want to come out in like 12 personnel, or if you have a good blocking receiver, have 11 personnel with that receiver there, like as a tight end, pseudo tight end type role, and just run some power at them. That's when they've been really susceptible in the run game. But I think overall it will be better later in the season. They have too much talent for it not to be better. They have DeForest Buckner, have Grover Stewart, have Zaire Franklin, Nick Cross coming down and making plays from strong safety. Like it's too much talent for it to be awful all year, but they are susceptible right now because they are still trying to figure some things out. Being like a 90% nickel defense right now. I can't even say 90% nickel because they play dime a lot as well, but like 95% nickel or dime defense right now. It's tough to fit the run there if you're not used to it.
Gotcha. Yeah, no, that's interesting. And that's the thing is like we talked so much in the preseason about the Raiders and wanting to play a lot of 12 personnel because they've got Michael Mayer and Brock Bowers.
Right.
And Michael Mayer was out last week because of a concussion, but like when he's healthy, that grouping could be really strong. And obviously Brock is dealing with a knee issue as well and just hasn't looked the same, so far. But I think this week, just in terms of like a guy that could come out, you mentioned some blocking receivers. Jacoby's a really good blocking receiver, but also their second round pick, Jack Besh. He's a guy that, Pete Carroll's talked about wanting to see more out of him, more reps for him, that is, because when he's played really solid. And he's such a physical player. I could see them using him more, maybe throw him out there in those 12 personnel sets with him and Jacoby and let them kind of both get after that front there and try and run the ball because it's very clear that they want to do that. Now, I'm sure you've seen the highlights of Jeanty, from this previous one. I'm not sure if you watched the actual game, but like, how do you feel he'll fare against this team? Obviously, the Raiders' offensive line has struggled up until this previous game here. But how do you feel about Jeanty, and how he matches up with this Colts defense?
Yeah, I will say last year's Colts defense would have given up 200 yards to him because nobody can tackle him. Even
Yeah,
even those first couple games where he was being like stymied and stuffed in the backfield, like it took like 6 people to get him down. A very
exactly.
physical, powerful runner, and you knew it was always a matter of time before he was going to hit that big game, and it obviously came this past week. The Colts at least have tackled fairly well on defense this season,
Mm,
especially
okay.
compared to last year. So I do think they're going to be better at just getting him on the ground, but as long as this Raiders O line comes to play and they have the right counters to what the Colts are doing, they should be able to get him 4 or 5 yards down the field before he gets contacted, and get
That's the
him
key.
contacted more with linebackers and safeties more so than defensive linemen. And those are obviously easier tackles to break. So, yeah, I think the Colts honestly would probably be fine too with him going for like 100 yards in this game,
Mm,
because a lot of what their defense is like you can get your yards on the ground. Our key is to be disruptive in the pass game, force your pass game
yeah.
to beat us. And that way, how it comes when running the football, right? If you get into a 2nd and 20 situation, 1st and 20 situation, you can't really run the ball. And then you're
Hmm.
relying on the passing game to make up those 20 yards. So that's kind of what the Colts like. It's like a bend, don't break defense whenever you try to run the ball. But when you pass the ball,
Hmm.
we're going to be diverse and we're going to attack you a little bit. So I think that they'll be fine with Jeanty getting his carries as long as he's not going like ballistic like he did this past
Yeah.
week. Um,
Yeah.
it would be about containing him though. Overall, like containing him, not stuffing him, I think will be the Colts game
Mhm.
plan.
Yeah, the key for him, I mean, that was one thing I think, heading into this game against the Bears was just like giving him a little bit of room to work. He was
Right.
getting hit. I think prior to the Colts game, he was getting hit like zero point 0.6 yards after he carried the ball. It was like zero point 0.6 yards before contact. So, like, give him room, let him see the defense, and that's where he can be that electric type player that's usually going to make the first guy miss. I'm curious, and I ask everybody this when we bring him in. Do you think the Colts have an answer for Brock Bowers? And again, he's not a fully healthy Brock Bowers, but how do you think they try and slow down Brock Bowers? Like, what's their answer for him?
Yeah, I mean, I don't think anyone in the league has an answer for a healthy
Yeah.
Brock Bowers. I mean, I think he's the best
Hmm.
tight end in football when he's healthy. He's just a fantastic talent, and we're still upset here in Indy that, I mean, look, we love Tyler Warren, but we're still upset in Indy that you guys grabbed him when I think the Colts were trying to move up for him in that
Yeah.
draft. But yeah, I think a lot of the Colts game plan for him would just kind of be like that. They have a strong safety they like a lot in Nick Cross, probably getting him just being physical with the player, probably dropping a lot of cloud coverage to wherever Bowers is going to be, and just keeping 1 to 2 eyes on him at all times. I don't think they're going to give him the Charvarius Ward treatment because that would just be weird, giving him an outside
Yeah.
corner on him at all times.
Yeah.
They might shadow him with Ward if he's like out as like a receiver out on the boundary or something like that. But I think it would mostly be like strong safety help with like a linebacker being physical with him at the line of scrimmage to disrupt him off the route, and then have that strong safety like in cloud or just on top of him, just to make sure that he can't get loose. But look, I always say this about star players: they're going to get theirs. Brock
Yeah.
Bowers, if he's healthy, he's going to get his because he's just a different level player. At the end of the day, when it comes to star players, you just got to contain them, make sure their big plays are 15 yards instead of 50 yards, and then you have a good chance. But Bowers is a special athlete. He's a fun player to watch when he's healthy.
Yeah, no, he is, especially like when they are moving him around and all the different ways they use him. And I think that's a really good point that like the star players are going to do what they do. So outside of that, for the Raiders, I think when this offense is really moving, it's when Jacoby Myers is getting involved.
Right.
Obviously, it's been kind of like a Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde for you, the two corners for you guys out there. How do you feel about how Jacoby matches up against both of the corners for the Colts on defense there?
Yeah, I'm curious to see if they view Myers as such a threat where Ward has to follow him for most of the game.
Hmm.
Because this past game, again, we had Charvarius Ward basically following Devontae Adams, and for the most
Hmm.
part, he did a good job of locking down Adams. Adams did have a touchdown, but that was with the safety not giving the help that he was supposed to on that play. The week before, they had him shadowing Calvin Ridley with the Tennessee Titans. So they have not been afraid about putting Ward just shadowing the top receiving threat. So if they view Myers as that top receiving threat, then yeah, he might get the Charvarius Ward treatment. And if he's getting the Ward treatment, it's going to be difficult to get catches. He is just, one of those top tier corners that you just trust on an island. Honestly, I wish the Colts would trust him even more on an island. Like if it were me, I wouldn't even roll a safety to his side if Ward is on a guy because he's just playing that good at football right now. Roll all the coverage to Xavien Howard if you if you have Ward on the other side. But I think the key for the Raiders really is just the big target on Xavien Howard and just keep going at him because even if he's not as bad as what he's showing this first month of the season because he's still getting his legs under him, you have to take advantage of what he is showing right now and just keep targeting him. That's what the Rams did this past week. They had a target on his back, and they said, we're not going to throw at Charvarius Ward unless it's, wide open, which it never is. So just keep going at that other cornerback side and don't worry. So if Myers finished this game with 0 catches, you could still throw for 300-something yards because it means that Ward was on him all game long.
Yeah, I'll be curious to see how Trey Tucker factors into that, and again, if Ward is following Jacoby in there, because Trey has popped off a couple times, albeit some of it in garbage time against the Commanders. But I think Trey's a guy that is very underrated. I've seen a lot out of him in training camp, and I think it's only a matter of time till he's super involved in this offense. I love all the breakdown of what you've dove into, man. So getting ready to close this one out here, I'm curious. And now we are taping this on Tuesday. It'll be being released on Wednesday morning here, so it's obviously very early in the week. But what do you think happens this Sunday, Indianapolis, and why? Who wins, and what's the difference in the game?
Yeah, I think this Colts team is going to be so difficult to play when they're at home, just because of how their offense operates at home with their pre-snap motion, with containing those pre-snap penalties to stay ahead of the sticks and relying on, I guess, feeding off that crowd noise as well. Because, again, a lot of what got blown up on the Colts offense last week was just the Rams jumping that snap, that silent count that just wasn't working in that road stadium. So getting back home to more of their controlled dome environment that they love back here in Indy, I think this Colts offense is going to be a very difficult out, and I could see them putting up high 20s again, low 30s type of points like we saw in the first couple of weeks. And then it's on Geno Smith to carry the way and get them back in the game, and he struggled recently. So far I feel good about this for the Colts, especially too with the injury to Kolton Miller at tackle, especially Leatu Latu. We haven't talked about him on here, but Leatu Latu, I think, is Pro Football Focus a third-rated pass rusher this year. Third-rated pass rusher, has like a 30% pass rush win rate right now at the minute. Just came off a game where he had like 9 pressures against the Rams and was just dominant. I think they're going to put him over Stone Forsythe or whoever is going to be starting there at offense. It's going to be Stone, I believe.
Stone.
Yeah, I think they'll get him over Stone, especially because Stone's a powerful offensive tackle, but he's not the quickest foot out there at tackle. It's always been the big knock on him his whole career. They'll let Latu just try to work the edge on him and get around him. So I think that'll be tough if the Colts get a lead early, throwing to get back in the game with a very good pass rusher who's on a heater right now against a backup offensive tackle. So I think that'll probably be the difference in this. So I'm feeling good about the chances for the Colts, but you can never count out a team that has Max Crosby and Brock Bowers and Ashton Jeanty. Star talent is everything in the NFL, and those are some star players. So if those guys show up, it's going to be a tough out for the Colts, even at home.
Yeah, I think it just matters which version of Geno Smith shows up for the Raiders. That's kind of been how the season has gone so far.
Right.
It's been a weird deal for him. I think you had Raider Nation, feeling pretty good about themselves in terms of being able to pass for 300 yards, against the number 2 corner there. Then you go and rip their heart out by saying, hey, Kolton Miller's out there. Yeah. He's going to go nuts on him.
Right. That was the big thing because the Colts, they like to run some man coverage, and that's where Howard is really able to be exposed. But if they've sensed blood in the water there on that side with the backup offensive tackle, which in the NFL, that's the nature of the NFL right now. Once you go down an offensive starter, especially at offensive tackle, your offensive line becomes so susceptible to everything. It is just difficult. It's harder to slide protection to DeForest Buckner now because you have to worry so much about the backup offensive tackle, and it's going to be tough to throw to get back in games. I think for the Raiders, the key in this game is going to be getting a lead early. Taking the ball, I would honestly take the ball to start the game, try to get 7 on the board early, and just hope that your defense can get a couple stops there and get the Colts out of their rhythm to where they're playing more catch-up ball. Because if the Colts get an early lead and they're able to do what they want to do in the second half with Jonathan Taylor, and they can just have Leatu Latu pin his ears back and just sit back in softer zone coverage, it's going to be difficult for them to come back and claw their way into this game, especially if Ashton Jeanty comes out of the equation, because you want to be able to run the ball. So I think the key for the Raiders is you got to get that lead early, get a 10-point lead in the first quarter, and then you have a good chance. But if the Colts go up 7 or 10 early, they're going to be tough at home to beat, I think, this year.
Yeah, no, I totally agree. The Raiders defense has played winning football more often than not this year, and I think it's a really good unit, overall. So it's let them play with a lead. But obviously, much easier said than done, given the way the offenses look. We still can't get a full read on them. And then for them, again, losing Kolton right after the offensive line seemingly got things, figured out against the Bears. That's a tough one for them. But Zach, man, you've been awesome. Before we get you out of here, let folks know where they can find your work and kind of what you got cooking this week if they want some more info on the Colts heading up to Sunday.
Yeah, you guys can find me over on social medias at Zach Hicks 2 over on Twitter, and I think on Instagram as well. I don't really use Instagram, but it's there if you guys want to look at that.
Support them there anyway.
Yeah, Zach, I changed everything to at Zach Hicks 2 to match the Twitter there. But I'm also the co-host over at Locked On Colts. My written work is over at horseshoehuddle.com. And I also have a personal YouTube channel. It's just Zach Hicks. I guess I didn't match that one to Zach Hicks 2, but that one's just Zach Hicks, where I do video film breakdowns. So more information on Laiatu Latu. I'm going to have some info on the Colts defense overall and their pros and cons of their defensive like calls and stuff coming up tomorrow. So you can really get a lot of the film breakdown here on this Colts team before the Raiders game here.
Yeah, they can scout it out and then really get after Geno if he doesn't have a good day. They can be like, I saw it. Why didn't you see it, man?
He just said Xavien Howard. Just throw it at him. And it's like, yeah. I mean,
exactly.
Probably.
That's the recipe for success.
Right.
Awesome, Zach. Thanks again, man. We really appreciate your time.
Yep, thanks for having me, man.
All right, hey, good stuff from Zach. Go check him out. I don't know about you, but I love that conversation. I always love bringing in guys from the opposing teams who are really knowledgeable. He very clearly knows ball, and that was a fun time. In the meantime, guys, we are back out at Raiders HQ for practice today, so keep an eye out for our coverage from down there in Henderson. If you're new to the channel, you can find me on Twitter. Yes, I do still call it that. My handle is at JesseSBSN. You can find us out there, and as I always do mention, I mentioned at the top of the show as well, but if you're not already subscribed to our free newsletter, head to silverandblacksportsnetwork.com, and please do subscribe. Again, it's free, costs you nothing. It includes a pair of newsletters dropping on Monday and Friday mornings at 6 a.m. They're chock full of all the biggest takeaways and analysis from game day, and a look ahead to what you should be watching out for over the weekend in the Friday edition as well. It's also a great way to support the growth of our brand for free too, so we really appreciate that. And again, do please make sure you like and subscribe to this podcast wherever it is that you guys are listening to us. If you like what you heard, hit us with a 5-star review and leave a comment as well. Those things help a ton. We do appreciate you guys watching and listening each and every week. The support has been big, and the channel just keeps on growing. We're loving it. In the meantime, though, guys, we will catch you on Friday morning, so take it easy.